Hello everyone, I'm Liza. My pronouns are she, her. For those who need an audio description, I have orange-red hair that's a bit below my shoulders. I'm in my mid-30s and have light skin tone, and today I'm wearing a purple dress. I'd also like to share with you all that I am neurodivergent. Usually this has an impact what I'm sharing on things I'm passionate about, like accessibility. I can talk quite quickly, I'll spark new ideas and divert. So really going to try and stick to the slides. And I'll also have a fidget tool, or for me it's a focus tool, it helps me regulate. For my presentation, my sources of information are primarily the Australian Government Style Manual, the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, and Microsoft. So for Apple users in the room, I do apologise. I will be using terminology that might be a bit different to what you use. So I know in communication, we often talk about the audience. For the work that I do, we talk about users because we think about how are people going to use the information. We also think about like a user journey. How are people coming to the information? What might they do next? So if I'm saying user, think of audience. Also, if I'm saying content, that's your information, that's your communication. Your content might be written, it might be video. Again, they're just the terms that I use and I'm familiar with. For accessibility, I will try to remember to read out the slides on the screen, and for those who can't see them. And I'd like to start with an acknowledgement of country. So the ACT government acknowledges the Ngunnawal people as the traditional custodians of the land of the ACT. We also recognise other people and families who have connection to this city and this region. We acknowledge the contribution they make to the life of this city and also respect their continuing culture. Personally, I have lived and worked on this land for most of my life, and I'm now raising my family here. So I want to pay thanks to elders past and present for caring for this land for tens of thousands of years. And a warm welcome to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who are here. So I'm going to talk about accessible communication. So it was great going after Morwenna because I am not an events nerd. I am not experienced in the events space. So what I'm planning to share with you is more an overview and going into some of the practical steps you can take. This is an introduction. Similar, there'll be lots of ideas, not expecting you to do them all. You might already be doing some of them, and by the end of this talk, similar to Morwenna, I hope there's one or two things that you want to start with because following Ross, we're going for progress, not perfection. I ideally would like to show you how to use tools. I know that's, as a neurodivergent person, how I like to learn, how to see it. I didn't have that functionality today, so we've got a few screenshots. So, accessible communication. I just want to start by saying there is no one way of communicating that is accessible to everyone. People have different communication needs, and so it's actually about being more aware of the different needs in different formats than there being one right way of communicating. And more when I talked about budget, and so what I'm sharing with you, I'm focusing on things you can do for free and start straight away. So accessible communication is designed so that it is understandable and usable for everyone, regardless of disability or needs. Everyone has the right to access information in a way that they can understand. This is protected under the UN Convention on the Rights of People with Disability, in Commonwealth disability discrimination law, in ACT discrimination law, and also in the ACT we have a Human Rights Act and we all have a freedom of expression. So to give and receive information in a way that suits us. Having access to information helps us to make informed decisions, which helps us to live our life and participate in the community. But for most of you in the room, the more accessible your content is, the more people can understand and the more people can enjoy your event. So I'll start with writing. I will spend the most time on this because I think writing can be applied in different formats. It can be specific to your events and planning and your comms going out. It can also be used, internally in your everyday work. So if you are working on certain types of communication, you are going to potentially need to go into more detail. So if it is website, I might be sharing some basic things, but there'll be deeper or more detailed expertise. So writing, keep it simple and well structured. I don't know if that will stay there. What I'm going to go through with you is 3 steps. So we first want to understand the user's needs. We then want to plan the structure. Then we're going to write in plain language. So Morwenna talked a bit about this, about your users are not just the people attending your event. When we are thinking about your users, you want to think about the type of event you're running, because that will identify if you are planning for the public compared to if you have targeted stakeholders. If your event is inside or outside, there'll be different communication needs. For example, if you are holding a training event for medical staff, the terminology and the point in which you could start explaining information would be very different if you're having an open health information for the public. So what I have on the slide is trying to keep things simple, 2 stakeholders, so stall holders and the public. Stall holders, things they might want to know about is, the cost of having a stall, if they need insurance, what time they can arrive, or, if their trailer can come up, some of those practical things. For the public, they want to know when it's on, if it costs to get in. They might want to know what is on, if the bands are playing or what the program and activities are. They want to know about how to get there, not just once they're at the event. As Morwenna said, it's also about how they can get there. So where can they park? Is there a bus? They might want to know about accessibility, like bathrooms. So once you've thought about your users' needs, and the way of finding this out, it ranges, but to put simply, you might do research, you might get feedback from years before, you might think about yourself if you were this user, what would you want to know? But we then want to think about grouping the needs into topics. So on the slide, I've roughly put some topics with different colours, and then that will help us when we want to plan our structure. So we can have different types of structure. It's really important that we're putting the most important information to the user first. We tend, and I know definitely in government, we default to the narrative structure. We start at the beginning, where it started and who it was and what legislation and what section and what team. And narrative is only really useful when the user wants to know the information from the beginning to the end. Hierarchical structure is most common. So you're grouping information and topics that are connected and prioritised by level of importance. So my example that I like to share is when we do car registration. When I go to the website, there's a lovely big purple button to renew my rego. And I click and there might be options of payment or how long I want to renew for. But there is not a big paragraph about what legislation it's related to, when did we start having to pay our registration, why is it important, what are the benefits of registration? So they're things to keep in mind. Sometimes we want to show that we've thought about these things or we feel we are accountable. You can have that information. You might have that information further down, or you might have it available if people ask, but think about what the user wants to know. Another type of structure is sequential, so things have to happen in order. So, for example, this topic of writing, I think you need to think about the user first before you start writing your content. So I have numbered it in a sequential order. So when you're planning your structure, you need headings. Headings help us help to break up information and also help us to navigate the information to find what we're looking for. So for us sighted folk, we tend to read left to right at the beginning and then we scan down on the left-hand side. If you were given an A4 page with just text, with no headings, it's hard to know where to start. And again, not a lot of us want to start at the beginning and go to the end. For some of our non-sighted folks, they use assistive technology. So there's different types. One is a screen reader. So they have software that reads out the text left to right, and they can also pick up headings and then use the headings to navigate what they're looking for. This is why it's important that we use the features in the software we're using. So again, I've got referring to Word. And so in Word, it's called the styles, and you use the headings. If you are just bolding and making text larger, that's not going to pick up as a header for people who use screen readers. It's important that we're using headers in order. So we talked about like topics. And so heading 1 is the topic. And if you've got subheadings, you can use sequential headings underneath. Don't go from heading 1 to heading 3 because heading 3 looks pretty. You need to go in order. You also can change the styles to suit your branding and your colours and different things and contrast. So on the screen, I have an example of heading 1, heading 2, heading 3. The font gets slightly smaller to indicate the different level. So this is a very simplified example. On the screen, I have plan your visit and getting to Enlightened as 2 different topics. And they have a heading 1. There are then subheadings underneath using header 2. And then under one of them, there is a heading 3. So that's for accessible parking. So I've actually gone into the 2 locations and made them a header. So this is just an example of how you would break up the topics and use headings to help people navigate your information. Now we're going to talk about plain language. So plain language, it's an international standard. There's lots of information and guidance. So again, just going to keep it simple. Plain language it can be applied to any language. So if you hear plain English and plain language is the same thing. English is the language. But what we're looking at with plain language is we're making it understandable for most Australians or people. We know from Australian Bureau of Statistics data that about half of Australians read and understand at a primary school level. So what the recommendation is to write at a year 7. So that means that people have finished year 7 of schooling. So it's about 12 to 14 years old. This is important because even if you've completed tertiary education, that doesn't mean that's how you want to read about your event. So we want to keep sentences to about 15 words. When you're getting to 20 or 25 words, make 2 sentences, think about a list. We want to use an active voice. So that's really is who is doing what, or for my more grammar-minded people, subject, verb, object. So an active voice is more direct than a passive voice. And research shows that users prefer when we use pronouns like we and you. If someone's come to an ACT government website, they will know that because they're probably looking for information from us or it's in the title. They don't need us to say ACT government will do this, ACT government will do that, ACT government will do this. It's much nicer to say, we are holding an event. You can apply to be a stall holder. We will assess your applications and you will need to confirm if you accept by this date. And the last thing is about using everyday words. There's lots of different ways to say things, but I've got 3 examples on the screen. So instead of additional, try more or extra. Instead of the event will commence, the event will start, the event will begin. Instead of require, need or must. So I have a draft example of an overview for the accessibility guide for Enlightened. It says, over 11 days, the Enlightened Festival lights up Canberra with art, culture and creativity. It is a major event produced by the ACT government, who are committed to reducing barriers to participation and delivering an event that is accessible and inclusive for all. A range of services are available to support your visit. The Enlightened Festival is committed to providing an inclusive, welcoming experience for everyone. The National Triangle site offers step-free pathways, accessible facilities, and a range of services to help you plan and enjoy your visit with confidence. Now, if I was doing this with staff, or this was more interactive, I'd get people to, point out some things maybe we could look at based on what I've just talked about. But considering our time and the layout of today, things we talked about in regards to sentence length, there's definitely some sentences that are quite long in there. Everyday words, there are some alternatives I think we can find, and an active voice. So being more about, what we will do. The other thing I'll point out is for a user, it's very unlikely that they would have picked up this accessibility guide cold. So it's much more likely that they've already looked at the event, they know what Enlightened is, and now they want to look at the accessibility guide. So you probably don't need to explain your event in detail. So, and if you're going to have some of this information, you just probably need to say it once rather than, like they've talked about, being committed to reducing barriers and then in the next paragraph, being committed to providing an inclusive, welcoming. They're very similar. So here is an example of how this may be written in plain language. We want to put on an accessible and inclusive event for all to enjoy. You can check out the range of services available to support your visit to the Enlightened Festival. So we're going to imagine that you have thought about your users, you've found your topics, you've planned your structure, you've written out your content, and now we're going to look at some tools and some tips for accessibility. Again, this is in Word. In the Microsoft suite, I believe most of, if not all of these are available across the suite. So the first tool is Editor. So it is an icon with a pencil or pen, blue outline, 3 blue lines. It's usually found in the home ribbon. It has many functions, is one of the screenshots shows, but the one that I want to point out is the readability statistics. So it can give you, again, based on what we've talked about, an indication on sentence length. It can give you an indication of the grade level. So the type of grade level is actually an American terminology, but again, it's an indication. And same with passive sentences. So really we'd love 0 passive sentences, but as low, 5% is good, 10 or more, you want to, maybe that's what you start to look at. So this functionality doesn't actually highlight where the passive voice is or doesn't highlight where a long sentence is. There are apps and things such as Hemingway, and then there's also, things that you can purchase and have a license for. However, I'm trying to show you easy, free options. So the next one is check accessibility. Hands up if anyone uses this at the moment. That is great. So a few years ago, when we wrote a document, we'd have to remember to do spell check. It wasn't done automatically. So we had to remember to do it. So now one of the things I'd like to suggest is that you remember to use check accessibility. It is not perfect. It won't pick up all accessibility considerations, but it is a great tool. It is found under the Review tab, check accessibility. It's an icon with a piece of paper and the universal symbol for accessibility, which is a person standing with its arms out. When you click on it, it takes you to an accessibility assistant. It will show you what's being checked. So in the screenshot on the slide, it shows it's picked up some hard to read text contrast. It's found some missing alt text. And what might be a bit harder to see is other things it's picked up and it's given a tick of I've checked it. That's all good. So that's a really great starting point. The other one is reading order pane, particularly if you have a PowerPoint presentation that you're going to share, because the different elements will be identified. And in our PowerPoint presentations, we can get colourful and creative and have logos. And the reading order pane will show you exactly that, the reading order it will be read out. So it's under check accessibility, but it's a different function. So you can still run it a check accessibility check and then also do the reading order pane. On the screen, what you'll see is an example of where it's brought up 4 items of a slide. And in this example, I would actually want what's come up as 3 to be 2. So I can move it. I can also unclick items. So for example, a presentation like this, where we have a lovely ACT government template and we have our logo in the corner, people who are using a screen reader do not want read out on every slide the content ACT government, the content ACT government, the content ACT government. So it can be important to unclick things as well. So for PDF, this is using Adobe. I have a screenshot on the left of a draft accessibility guide for Enlightened. And this, when you look at it, looks accessible. They have used good contrast in their colours. They've broken up their information. They have headings. But when we think about the digital accessibility, and I run an accessibility check, and I also check the reading order on the right, you can see that the title comes up 6th. I would like that to come up first. So just because a PDF looks nicer doesn't mean that it is accessible to everyone. Sometimes you might choose just to have a Word version because you don't have the license with Adobe, because you need a license for Adobe Pro to be able to check and change aspects for accessibility. Some people say, oh, but Liza, someone could change the Word document. First of all, don't know who would be bothered. They have other things to be doing. People can change a PDF. And there's this thing called AI where people could just make a whole new document. Like, what you have is what you publish is your source of truth. So even if someone did modify it and sent it around, you can show what's on your website and what's the correct information. So again, this is a bit of the technical, but we're thinking about digital accessibility. If you have a document that you are publishing on the internet, you need to make sure that your document has a title. So this is not the file name. In Microsoft, you go File, Info, Properties, and then Title. In a PDF, again, you need Adobe Pro. You can side-click the document and Document Properties comes up and you can put the title. This is important for a couple of reasons. First, search engines use the metadata, so that information such as title, when they're looking for results. So if you still have it as template 1, accessibility guide, that might not come up for Enlightened or your event. Also, when the document is opened in a browser, and you may not be like me, I have multiple tabs, and then I'll go back and I'll look at the tabs, and if it's like 6534111 final version, like, what is that? So again, the title will turn up in the tab. So that, again, improves people's navigation and understanding. It's really important that you are starting from Word to ensure your accessibility, because in Word, when you do an accessibility check, if it picks up something, it will take you to that area and you can improve it. It's much easier to change headings or assign different levels, and you don't need Adobe Pro to do those things. So make your Word version as accessible as practical, and then convert it to a PDF if you have a need to have it in a PDF version. So let's talk about that a little bit more. So I mentioned screen readers. So research from the University of Melbourne was that a Word document or a text format document is significantly more preferred because not all screen reader software is compatible with PDF. It's also, for a PDF, if you're scanning a document, it's only good for sighted people. A scanned document is not going to pick up the text, the headings, all of that. So please avoid that. And you can also have different types of different types of formats for the same information. And again, this may take a little bit more time initially, but also I imagine a lot of events are reoccurring, or you can use what you've invested at the beginning for next time. And this is part of making your communication accessible. So on the slide is a screenshot from an ACT government website for the ACT disability strategy. The part I have of the screenshot is a list of formats that the strategy and first action plan is available in. This includes Word and PDF. It includes an easy English version. So that is where we use images and shorter sentences and even more simple language for people who may have an intellectual disability or other low literacy needs. They also have a video, and I believe that the video also has an Auslan interpreter included. So you might not be able to do this all the time, but it's an example. You do have to be mindful, though, that if you are updating information in one source, that it then needs to be updated in all sources. All right, images. This is a lot shorter because this is not my area of expertise. The two main things I want you to know about images is alt text and colour contrast. So the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, one of the very first guidelines is text alternative. So we need to provide text alternative for any non-text content. So this is images, graphics, banners, illustrations, charts, videos. This is because the text is changed into other forms. So we talked about screen reader. Some people have it Braille come out. So when we are providing alt text, we want to keep it short if it's an image. We want to describe the main components. We don't have to describe every single detail. If it's a chart or graph, you need to include legend information. If you have, it might not be as relevant, but I know for our annual reports, we can have lots of lovely tables, and the alt text is table 1. That tells me nothing about what does table 1 indicate. Does it show there's been an increase in demand? Has it shown that we've improved our services? So you need to provide some more information for the people who cannot see the visual. And avoid phrases like image of, chart. The screen reader software will know that. If you have images as your background, don't put text over that. It's really hard to read. But background or decorative images can be marked as decorative, so they're not read out. What you include in your alt text will depend on how you're using the image. An example, again, in Microsoft, once you've inserted the image, you side-click it, and in the drop-down menu, there should be View Alt Text. So on this slide, I have an email banner from the National Multicultural Festival. It's very colourful. It has a green background. There's food and volunteers sort of transparent in the background. But this is the alt text that I used. So text says National Multicultural Festival, 6th to 8th of February 2026, Canberra CBD, includes people smiling and performing in colourful cultural outfits. So if you have any text in your image, it needs to be in the alt text because the screen reader will not pick that up. Another thing is screen readers will not pick up colour. So if you're only using colour to indicate information, that is not accessible. So on the slide, I have an example of a table and services available at an event, and I've used green as yes, we have them, red, we don't have them, and yellow, that they are limited. I have a key. My key shows what the colours mean, but that's not helpful for a screen reader. Similar if you're using icons. You would need to, if you're using a tick or a cross, which is also an example on the slide, you need to be doing alt text for each of those. So if you're doing alt text for each of those, you may want to just put the text in the table. Tables and accessibility are a whole nother talk. So next is contrast. This is also important for your text, but I need a bit more information for images. To put simply, you want high contrast. So you want a light on dark, whether that's foreground or background. So the best contrast is white and black. For us sighted folk, we love a bit of colour. Colour can also portray its own meaning, can be engaging. So what you need to do is find the hex value of the colour of your background and foreground. So how you do this in Word is If it's font, you can go to font color, or if you've filled in a shape, you can go to the fill color. You can go down to more fill colors, and then the hex value is at the bottom. So then I use a free tool called WebAIM, and would like to just do a shout out to my graphic design colleagues because there is so much more involved in accessibility and images. This is very basic. So in WebAIM, I then put the two colours. So I've chosen a very light purple, and I've used the text ACT Government, and I've put in an example of that colour on a white background, and it has failed. If I change it to a darker purple on a white background, it has passed. So Morwenna talked about signage and contrast. So I then decided to use a symbol and background. So again, using the light purple on white has failed, but on black it has passed. But I like the purple that goes with our branding, so I'll do just a slightly different dark purple. So for me and my sighted abilities, I can see that contrasted fine. I can see that that symbol is a no smoking sign, but that doesn't mean it's accessible for everyone. So now just some quick tips. Include an accessibility guide. As Morwenna said, information is a big part of what makes your event accessible. I would encourage you, if you haven't already, to look at the Enlightened Accessibility Guide. It's not that you have to provide all the services that they do, but look at the level of information. They've talked about details of how to get somewhere, how to use the app, not just there is an accessibility app. There's a bit more information that helps users. Again, if you're asking about dietary requirements, talk about reasonable adjustments or ask about them. It's really important, and again, it varies depending on your event, but it is a great thing for you to start to look into. Most reasonable adjustments will have no or low cost. Again, you need to have multiple ways that people can contact you if they need help. So not just having an info email, there needs to be a phone number. When you have multiple people speaking, so we're about to have a panel, this also applies if you're in a meeting. If you don't know the users or it's a public forum, so you don't know people's needs and abilities, it really helps to say your name before you start talking. So I know that'd be a new thing, but that helps, again, people who might be low vision or blind to know who's talking. Have your information in lots of places. Don't just put it on the website and say, it's there, it's accessible. Include the main information on most of your communication. So the name, the date, the location, in your social channels, in your newsletters. Two last things. One is links. Links can be very useful. They link us to more information. They link us to the registration page. They link us to the location map. For screen readers, some of them have technology that they read out links like a list. So not necessarily they're reading it in a sentence. So it's a bit like searching headings. They'll be like, all right, what are the links? What other information can I go to? So it's quite common that people be like, to find out more, click here. To find out more, click here. So think about if some screen reader and they go to the links and they have click here, here, read more. That doesn't tell them where to go, how to book. So the example on the screen shows about highlighting events on our Eventbrite page rather than click more. So making sure we're using informative text in our links. Last one is videos. If it is pre-recorded video, you need captions and a transcript. That's part of the minimal web content accessibility standards. Again, you need high contrast, captions need to be black and white, and you need to check the accuracy of your captions and your transcript before you publish. There can be some amazing interpretations with words and acronyms. And when we're talking about web content accessibility, there's different levels, and AAA is the highest level. And so if you have an Auslan interpreter, that is the highest level of accessibility. And as Morwenna pointed out before, it's because spoken English is often not their primary language for the deaf community. So I hope that is helpful and not too overwhelming. We are going for progress, not perfection. And thank you very much for listening.